Other people get reborn and use their foresight to make money. The moment I opened my eyes, I was already carrying a fishing net and charging into the rainstorm. In the 1982 flood, all the fish in the whole river were waiting for me. One cast brought in dozens of jean, and another cast filled the whole catch net to bursting. But when I returned fully loaded, Widow Wong, who used to chase after me cursing, quietly reached out a hand by the riverbank. 1982, the Chimba Mountains. The bamboo mat dug painfully into my bones, and the musty smell drilled straight into my nose. I pinched my thigh hard, leaving a large bruise. It hurt. It fucking hurt. Xiangyang, was reborn. In my previous life, I was the village's notorious hooligan, stealing chickens and dogs, getting into fights, even peeping at widows bathing and being chased all over the village with curses. The door was suddenly pushed open. Second brother. It's already noon. Mom made pickled cabbage noodles. Why aren't you up yet? I shot upright. Before me was my little sister, Xiangyang. In my previous life, during that catastrophic flood in '83, a landslide struck, and except for my sister-in-law who had returned to her parents' home, my whole family died. By the time I got the news, I had just been forcibly discharged from the army for secretly reading a handwritten copy. Xiangyang. My throat tightened. My sister was still here. Dad, Mom, and my brothers were all still alive. What year is it? Brother must have slept himself silly. I forced myself to stay calm. The year of the dog. Right. Mom said today was the start of autumn. 1982, the start of autumn. My head buzzed. This very afternoon, Zhao Hongxia, the village chief's daughter, would be swept away by the flood at Liangheku while trying to fish out a lamb that had fallen into the water. Second brother, where are you going? I turned and took down the cast net hanging under the eaves to dry. Going to Liangheku to see if I can catch some fish. You all eat first. Put on your rain cape. Xiangyang called after me. Throwing on the straw rain cape and putting on a rain hat, I rushed into the curtain of rain carrying my fishing net. Chapter 2. Danger strikes following the swollen Longwang Gully. I strode quickly downstream. Less than 2 li away was Liangheku, where it flowed into the Yu River. It was the rainy season, and the river had risen high. Quite a few villagers had gathered by the bank to watch the water, some holding grappling hooks, trying to salvage anything useful. I scanned around, but didn't see Zhao Hongxia, so I simply started by untangling my net. This net had been allotted to the Li family at the start of the year when farmland was distributed to households, and my father had earned quite a lot of work points with it before. Over the years, I'd picked up most of the skill of casting nets too. Probably the only thing this hooligan had that's worth mentioning. After sorting out the net, I aimed at the backwater bay where the big and small rivers met and cast it out in one throw. Got something. The moment the net sank to the bottom, the rope in my hand transmitted a fierce jolt. When I dragged it to shore, the muddy water churned violently. I lifted the net, 6 lively river fish. 1 silver carp weighing over 10 jean, 1 grass carp of 5 or 6 jean, 1 carp with golden scales and a red tail, plus 3 crucian carp of about half a jean each. The riverbank erupted in amazement. But when people recognized my face through the rain curtain, that amazement instantly turned to contempt. Isn't that the Leaf family's hooligan? What a waste of such fine fish. The crowd quickly scattered as if avoiding the plague. I didn't care. I snapped off a willow branch to string the fish onto, weighed it down with stones, and kept casting. The next few casts were all quite rewarding, with more than a dozen big fish over 3 jean alone. The mesh was small enough to pull up quite a few white minnows and Chinese hook snout too, the ones I couldn't string up. I simply tossed to the eager children nearby. The children scrambled for them, and at first their parents awkwardly scolded them. But seeing me keep my head down and cast my net without caring at all, the scolding grew quieter and quieter, until in the end they simply turned their backs. After all, this was the resource-scarce 1980s. Suddenly, a black cloth umbrella on the distant river embankment caught my attention. Beneath it, a slender figure was carefully making her way over the slick mud. Her pant legs were rolled up high, revealing a section of fair calf. Her half-worn plastic sandals were covered in mud. The edge of the umbrella lifted. Zhao Hongxia. Her gaze swept over the crowd and fell on the pile of catch at my feet. Her steps hesitated for a moment. When she looked at me again, 2 little canine teeth showed at the corners of her mouth, and a faint smile flashed across her face. She didn't know that the roaring Yu River just a few steps away would swallow her young life in a few minutes. I tightened my grip on the fishing net. The rain came down harder. Beneath the curtain of rain, the muddy waves roared. Zhao Hongxia carefully walked to the water's edge and stretched her foot into the current, gently swaying it. Her slender figure looked especially fragile beside the surging river. My heart clenched instantly. I wanted to call out a warning, but forcibly swallowed it back. Who would care about the goodwill of a hoodlum? Luckily, she was only rinsing her sandals and nothing went wrong. But just as she was about to stand up, look, there's a lamb in the river. My whole body jolted. It was happening. A little lamb was struggling desperately in the water not far from her, and was about to be swept into a whirlpool. It's still alive. Zhao Hongxia's voice was anxious. She instinctively bent down, braced her left hand against a rock half buried in the mud on the bank, and stretched out her right arm to reach for it. Don't. Before the words were out, that rock, its foundation hollowed out by the undercurrent, suddenly collapsed. Together with Zhao Hongxia, it was instantly swept away by the floodwaters. The short cry was swallowed by the sound of the water. She was swept into the torrent like a fallen leaf, with only her jet-black hair bobbing in the muddy waves. Hongxia! Xia! Shouts erupted from the bank. I charged out like a cheetah. All the strength in my body poured into my right arm as the fishing net sliced through the rain curtain, accurately covering her. Splash! The net went taut the moment it hit the water, and a clear, struggling sensation came from below. Got her! Pull! People on the bank shouted. I clenched my teeth and held tightly onto the rope. Zhao Hongxia's figure vaguely appeared in the net, and along with that lamb, I dragged them with difficulty toward the shore. Just when they were only a few steps from shore, the accident happened. That net was meant for catching fish after all. It couldn't hold a person. Under the huge impact, the mesh line suddenly went slack. The fishing net was dragged to the bank, and only the little lamb was left inside. Zhao Hongxia slipped out of the net and was swept another 3 meters away by the torrent. Oh no, it's over. Despairing laments rose from the shore. Damn! I roared, violently threw off my straw rain cape, and without the slightest hesitation leaped into the raging floodwaters. The icy river water sent a shudder through my whole body, and the tremendous impact tossed me every which way. I paddled frantically toward that bobbing figure. I suddenly reached out and grabbed, not an arm, but slippery fabric. Rip! The Indietacrin shirt Zhao Hongxia was wearing was torn open by me. In the muddy current, her fair skin was exposed before countless eyes. She screamed in terror and struggled even more violently. But that accident gave me a precious point of leverage. Taking advantage of it, I lunged forward, and my other hand clamped tightly onto her arm. Grab me. Pull the rope, quick. The people on the bank came to their senses and tugged with all their might on the rope still tied to my arm. Luckily, we weren't far from shore, and under everyone's desperate pulling, the two of us finally made it back to the shallows without further danger. Once ashore, I let go of Zhao Hongxia, whom I had been holding tightly. The two of us collapsed awkwardly onto the muddy riverbank. She coughed violently, spitting out the river water she had choked on. Her torn clothes barely covered her body, and it was impossible to tell whether the wetness on her face was rain, river water, or tears. It was filled with terror. Several women from the village hurriedly took off their outer clothes to wrap around her and supported her as they left, leaving only a mess on the ground and countless complicated looks. I collapsed in the mud and water, gasping for breath. After resting for quite a while, I tried to stand up, only to find that I was badly drained. At that moment, 2 hands reached out in front of me. One belonged to Haidener from the village, and the other to my younger uncle from the Li family, Li Maosheng. As we were about to reach shore, I caught a glimpse of 3 people desperately pulling the rope, and the 2 of them were among them. And the other one was actually Widow Wang, who had chased me to my door and cursed me for secretly watching her bathe. Even she was willing to put aside her prejudice and lend me a hand. Struggling to my feet, I walked over to the pile of big fish and picked out 2 large ones for Haidener. Brother, thanks. Haidener looked at the plump fish, scratched his head, and took them. Then I picked up 2 more and handed them to Li Maosheng. Uncle, thank you for your hard work. Li Maosheng looked at the fish, then at his soaked-through nephew, and silently accepted them. Finally, I picked up a grass carp and a silver carp and walked over to Widow Wang. She instinctively took half a step back, her eyes darting away. Sister-in-law, thank you so much for helping. In a hoarse voice, I bowed slightly, and also, I was foolish in my younger years, so please accept my apology. I'm sorry. After saying that, I bowed again and held the fish out a little farther. Widow Wang was stunned. The surroundings fell silent instantly. No one had expected this hooligan to bring up that scandal in public and apologize so solemnly. Her face flushed red at once, and she didn't know what to do. She looked at the big fish in front of her, then at my mud-stained but unusually earnest face, and then thought of the children at home who hadn't had a taste of meat in more than half a year. Her hand stretched out, then pulled back again. Chapter 3 Guilt Take it, Sister Yuqing. Go back and let the kids have a good meal. Li Maoxing urged softly. Xiangyang knows he was wrong. Haidener also chimed in. Widow Wang's lips moved, but in the end she said nothing. She shot me a complicated glance, took the fish, and hurried off, swaying her full waist. Watching her back, I quietly let out a sigh of relief. The apology was sincere, and it was also a necessary step in turning over a new leaf. Besides saving Zhao Hongxiao, the next two most important things were, first, to make money so the family could live better, and second, to straighten the bent spine again. For a man, as long as he has enough money, no matter how disgraceful his past was, there will always be people who use a prodigal who returns is worth more than gold to speak up for him. Second brother. My younger sister came trudging over with a huge basket nearly as tall as half a person on her back. Uncle Genwa said you caught a lot of fish, so I came to pick you up. When she got close and saw that I was soaked through, she panicked. Second brother, what happened to you? Did you fall into the river? I'm fine. I rubbed her head and pointed at the fish on the ground. Come on, let's go home and eat fish. Second brother, you're amazing. Xiaoyan stared at the pile of big fish, her mouth hanging open in shock. I loaded all the spoils, along with the straw rain cape and fishing net, into the basket. As we were leaving, I noticed that little lamb was still there. The little thing caught Xiaoyan's interest, and she kept circling around it. The rain had let up a bit, just as the brother and sister disappeared around the bend of the river embankment. Those villagers who hadn't helped and hadn't gotten any fish gathered together. He lucked into catching so many fish. They're so poor, who knows if there's even any cooking oil in the house. Her clothes were all torn up, with all that pale flesh exposed, and he even gave fish to Widow Wang. Most likely it's a weasel paying a New Year's call to a chicken. At this moment, however, I felt extremely satisfied inside. Not only had I saved the girl I had a secret crush on in my previous life, but I also had a chance to redeem the lost family affection and the life that had once been despised. Of course, prejudice in people's hearts is like a great mountain. The cracks in family bonds also need to be mended with sincerity. But it's not too late for any of it. The greatest confidence in living this life over again is not foreseeing the future, but seeing the past clearly. When I walked home carrying fish on my back, holding the lamb, and leading my little sister, my father, who was sitting under the eaves weaving straw sandals, was clearly stunned for a moment. This honest and simple farmer habitually darkened his face and let out a heavy snort. But just as I bent down to take off the back basket, he threw aside the beard grass in his hands and stiffly walked behind me, stretching out his big calloused hands to support the edge of the back basket. The basket hit the ground with a dull thud. As soon as he let go, father immediately turned around, sat back on the small stool, and resumed weaving straw sandals. This is the rural style of fatherly love. He won't ask if you're tired. He'll just use his actions to help support the weight, hiding his concern beneath a stern face. Second son, how did this happen to you? Mother, Zhang Tianhui, came out of the kitchen when she heard the noise. Seeing the basket more than half full of fish, a rare smile appeared on her face. But when her gaze fell on me, her face filled with worry again. Look at you, soaked all over. Go change your clothes, quick. I'll make you a bowl of ginger soup. My mother's utterly ordinary nagging sounded like heavenly music to my ears. That complaint tinged with the warmth of everyday life. And the figure of her turning away to busy herself were the most heart-wrenching longing in my midnight dreams after that disaster in my previous life. People always only understand the value of what they once had after losing it. I lowered my head to suppress the surging emotions and turned to change clothes. When I came out, I took the pickled vegetable noodles mother handed me and wolfed them down in a few bites. The most ordinary, even shabby, home-cooked meal of this era made my whole body feel at ease. Setting down the bowl, I picked up the big wooden basin and squatted under the eaves, using the dripping water from the roof to start washing the fish. Mom, boil more water and give that little lamb a hot bath. It swallowed some water, and I don't know if it'll survive, I said without even raising my head as I scraped off scales, removed the gills, and gutted the fish. Zhang Tianhui poked her head out from the kitchen and glanced at the little lamb her daughter was teasing with green grass. And although she found it strange, seeing the serious look on my face and that different kind of energy about me, she nodded. Just then, footsteps came from the other side of the yard. My brother and sister-in-law were back. My brother, Li Xiangyang, was a man of few words. 3 months ago, he married the daughter of the master who had taught him bamboo weaving. My sister-in-law, Zhang Ziqin, was pleasant-looking, but there was always a shrewdness and distance in her eyes. Because my reputation as a good-for-nothing was so terrible, not long after the wedding, my sister-in-law persuaded them to split the household, afraid of being dragged down by me. In my previous life, I hated her to the core, but now that hatred had been diluted by guilt. Because after that overwhelming disaster, it was this seemingly shrewd woman who, under pressure, stubbornly gave birth at her parents' home to my brother's posthumous child. That child was the only continuation of the Leaf family's bloodline. I fished out the two biggest fish from the wooden basin and deftly threaded their gills with a palm leaf, then carried them over to my brother. Brother, I caught these today at Xiangyang. You and sister-in-law cook them and eat them. My brother froze. He looked at the fish held out in front of him, then raised his eyes to me, his face full of disbelief. He sized me up from head to toe for several seconds, as if confirming my identity. In the end, he nodded and took them. A look of surprise and mixed emotions also flashed across my sister-in-law's face. She glanced at the fish in her husband's hands, then at me squatting by the basin, lightly touched her husband's arm, and turned to walk toward the west room. Under the eaves, Father stopped weaving and took a few puffs on his pipe. The spicy fragrance of ginger soup drifted out from the kitchen. Xiangyang squatted by the wooden basin, her big eyes full of anticipation for the fish. I knew that changing my family's opinion of me was harder than saving people in a flood. It required action, and it also required time. This time, I not only wanted to save my loved ones' lives, but also win back this hard-regained family bond. Chapter 4: A lasting solution. After finishing the ginger soup, the fish had also been cleaned up. 8 large ones were given away, leaving 10 large fish. Silver carp die as soon as they leave the water, so I only washed 2 silver carp and 1 grass carp, while 7 carp and more than a dozen gene of large crucian carp were kept alive for the time being. Seeing that the rain had stopped and it was still early, I lined the basket with a piece of plastic sheeting, loaded the fishing net, and headed toward Xiangyang again. Father stopped weaving straw sandals. His lips moved, but as he watched my straight-backed figure, he tapped his pipe and swallowed his words. When I appeared at Xiangyang again, stories about me had been circulating by the river all afternoon. But unlike the purely contemptuous looks from the afternoon, this time they were mixed with much more complicated feelings. I paid them no attention at all. My eyes were only on the muddy, surging current and the eddy where the fish were gathering. My judgment was correct. As the floodwaters receded slightly, the current became steadier and the disturbed schools of fish gathered again. As soon as I cast the net, the rope in my hand once again transmitted violent struggling. Up. In the net bag were 3 lively big grass carp, each weighing 4 or 5 gene. There was another wave of exclamations all around. After that, almost every cast came up with something. At best, a single net bag held several big fish, grass carp, silver carp, pulling my hands so hard they ached. At worst, I could still catch a few crucian carp, Xiangyang, or yellow catfish. As usual, every cast also brought up small miscellaneous fish, white striped fish, Chinese hook-snout carp, and even stream groupers, which were snatched up by the children again and again. One cast even brought up an old soft-shelled turtle weighing a full 4 gene. It clawed frantically inside the net, its neck stretching out more than a jaw long, making the children shriek with excitement. By dusk, more than a dozen big fish were piled at my feet, adding up to 60 or 70 gene. The basket was packed even fuller, with more than 20 carp and over 30 gene of large crucian carp struggling with their mouths open in the muddy water. A familiar figure came walking along the river embankment. It was Mother. She was carrying a basket on her back too. Hearing that I was showing great prowess by the river again, she was afraid I wouldn't be able to carry everything, so she came in person to help. Second son, how did you get so many fish? Zhang Tianhui was both happy and distressed. Mother and son had no time for more talk and loaded all the fish into the basket. That old soft-shelled turtle was tied separately with a straw rope and carried in my hand. The heavy basket pressed down on Mother's thin shoulders, and it made my heart ache. I wanted to take some of the load, but she refused. On the way home, Mother suddenly spoke, her voice full of worry. Second son, what are we going to do with so many fish? We can't keep many alive at home, and in this heat, if they go bad, it'll be such a waste. Mom, don't worry. I comforted her. When we get back, we'll clean the silver carp and grass carp right away, rub them with salt and chili powder, make them into cured fish, and hang them from the kitchen beam to smoke and eat slowly. As for the carp and big crucian carp, we'll keep them alive tonight in the drainage ditch. And tomorrow morning I'll walk upstream along the river, cross Yuha Bridge, and take them to town to sell. Sell them? Mother paused, her tone uneasy. This? Will that work? Won't we get arrested for speculation and profiteering? Mom, don't worry. The policy was relaxed long ago. Haven't you seen all those people selling eggs and vegetables in front of the supply and marketing cooperative in town? This is called invigorating the economy, and it's allowed by the authorities. Selling fish I caught myself in exchange for money through my own labor is perfectly justified. Although Mother was still a little uneasy, seeing how certain I was, and thinking of the changes that had indeed taken place in the village, her anxiety eased somewhat. She said nothing more and silently adjusted the basket on her shoulder. Xiangyang also said nothing more because at this moment, he was already planning in his mind a more long-term way to make money. The heavy backpack basket was finally set down at the kitchen door. Xiangyang had no time to rest and hurriedly found a pickaxe and headed toward the drainage ditch on the east side of the house. There was a small pit there, originally used for washing sweet potatoes, about 2 feet square and a little over a foot deep. What he wanted to do was extend it, widen it, and dig it deeper to use for raising fish. Thud! The sharp tip of the pickaxe drove into the damp, soft earth and stones with a dull sound, breaking the stillness of the small courtyard. The first to be disturbed was his father, Li Maochun. He was sitting on a stool twisting a straw rope. Hearing the noise, he looked up and walked over, seeing that it was his younger son digging by the drainage ditch. His brows furrowed instinctively, and a trace of confusion and displeasure flashed across his face. But after watching for only a few seconds, he ultimately said nothing and turned away. Immediately after, Li Xiangdong's tall figure also came out through the main door of the west room. He had obviously heard the commotion too. Crossing the courtyard, he walked over to his younger brother, who was digging with all his strength. He watched in silence for quite a while, then, like their father, turned around and went back inside without saying a word. Li Xiangyang was focused on enlarging the pit and did not notice his father and brother's brief tawakkuf. However, before long, a faint sound of footsteps approached again. Li Xiangyang stopped swinging the pickaxe, turned around panting. It was his brother Li Xiangdong. At some point, he had come out again. Unlike before, he was holding the family's only household appliance, a tin flashlight powered by 3 batteries. Li Xiangdong still said nothing, only silently switched on the flashlight. A beam of light pierced the darkness and shone onto the pit Li Xiangyang was digging. Li Xiangyang's heart suddenly warmed. The beam silently followed his movements. With this light, the digging became much smoother. Fortunately, the rocky soil by the drainage ditch was already fairly loose. With the 2 brothers working together, one swinging the pickaxe with all his strength and the other silently holding the light, that originally cramped little pit expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sounds of the pickaxe striking the earth and the shovel scooping dirt rang out in turns, yet neither brother spoke a word. There was only their heavy breathing and the slight swaying of the flashlight beam. At last, a new pit about 1.5 meters long, about 1 meter wide, and 50 to 60 centimeters deep took shape. The murky water from the drainage ditch was slowly seeping in. Leaning on the pickaxe, Li Xiangyang wiped the sweat from his forehead and turned to Li Xiangdong. "That's enough, brother." Li Xiangdong nodded and, with a click, switched off the flashlight. The light vanished abruptly, leaving only the hazy night. He turned around, seeming about to leave in silence, just as he had come. "Brother!" Li Xiangyang quickly called out to stop him. Li Xiangdong halted and turned half his body in the dark. Li Xiangyang strode to the kitchen door, where the big fish they had just brought back were piled up. He deftly picked up a big-head carp and a grass carp and carried them over to his elder brother. "Take these 2 fish. Later, send them to sister-in-law's mother's home." Li Xiangdong froze once again. He looked at the fish being held out to him, then raised his eyes to look at his younger brother, the muscles on his face twitching slightly. He was being asked to take fish caught by their own family and deliver them to his father-in-law. This really was not like his younger brother at all. "Take them." Seeing that he would not accept them, Li Xiangyang directly stuffed the fish into his hands. Li Xiangdong reflexively reached out and took one. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end not a single word came out. He nodded heavily, tucked the flashlight under his arm, then picked up the other big fish and turned to walk through the main door of the west room. Watching his elder brother's back disappear, Li Xiangyang let out a long breath. Looking back again, he saw that the fish pond had already filled up nearly halfway with water. He brought over the wooden basin and the backpack basket holding the carp and big crucian carp, and put them all into the newly dug water pit. Once the fish entered the water, they immediately flicked their tails and began to swim around, clearly much more at ease than in the wooden basin. Li Xiangyang still wasn't reassured, worried that if it rained and the water rose during the night, These precious fish might slip away with the current. He found some sturdy branches and densely set up a row of fencing outside the outlet of the water pit. Just as he finished, his younger sister Xiaoyang's clear voice rang out. "Second brother, come quick. Time to eat fish." Because the main hall, one main room on the west side, and one side room had been given to eldest brother's family, the family ate outside the kitchen. Under the dim kerosene lamp, on the old square table, sat a huge earthenware basin. That was the family's pot lid, now serving as the container for the fish. Their mother Zhang Tianhui was quite skilled at cooking. 2 silver carp and 1 grass carp had been lightly fried first, then simmered into a rich broth, with bright green scallion segments and the family's homemade pickled vegetables floating on top, the aroma utterly enticing. Seeing the whole family seated around the table, Xiaoyan impatiently picked up a big piece of fish, blew on it as she brought it to her mouth, and even though it was so hot it made her little mouth grimace, she still couldn't bear to spit it out. With her mouth still full, she mumbled indistinctly, "So good. Mom's fish is the best." But aside from Xiaoyan occasionally letting out satisfied sighs and a few words of praise, the dinner table was unusually quiet. Father Li Maochun sat in the seat of honor, eating the mixed soup left over from noon with his head down. Occasionally he picked up a piece of fish as well, chewing silently, with little expression on his face. Mother Zhang Tianhui, on the other hand, seemed a little absent-minded, glancing from time to time toward the drainage ditch outside, then at her younger son eating with his head down, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and relief, and of course a trace of unease that had not yet faded. Li Xiangyang also ate in silence, but what he was thinking about was tomorrow's trip and the family's longer-term livelihood. As they were almost done eating, the usually silent father suddenly put down his chopsticks. His lips moved as if he had been working up to it for a long time before he finally spoke in a muffled voice. "I heard from your mother. You're going to sell fish tomorrow morning?" His eyes were not on Li Xiangyang, but on the tabletop, as if he were asking the table. Li Xiangyang immediately put down his bowl, sat up straight, and replied, I'll leave before dawn and catch the morning market." Li Maochun fell silent for a few seconds, as if digesting the information. After a while, he nodded. "Then I'll go. Borrow the production team's flatbed handcart for you." Li Maochun's words left Li Xiangyang stunned for a moment. When he came to his senses, he realized that his father's offer to help borrow the handcart meant that his father acknowledged the legitimacy of him selling fish, and even, for the time being, acknowledged him as his son. That handcart was not merely a means of transport, but his father's silent and weighty support. "Oh, okay. Li Xiangyang nodded. "Thanks, Dad." Li Maochun said nothing more, rubbing the kerosene lighter to light his tobacco pipe, then smacking on it as he paced out of the kitchen with his hands behind his back. After dinner, Li Xiangyang lay down early to sleep. That night, he carefully went over everything he knew from his previous life, only to find that, aside from knowing that the flood would bring disaster to the family, he didn't have much useful information. This made him feel somewhat dejected. Yet when he turned over again, his fingers touching the cold, hard adobe wall, he suddenly figured it out. Even without a golden finger, being able to save the girl he once had a crush on and save his whole family's lives, that was already an immense blessing from heaven. How could he ask for too much? At the first crow of the rooster the next day, Li Xiangyang opened his eyes. He quietly slipped on his clothes and pushed open the door, only to find his mother busy in the kitchen. On the chopping board, a steaming bowl of fish soup noodles was giving off an enticing aroma, clearly just cooked, with several pieces of fish left over from last night resting on top of the noodles. "Mom, why are you up so early?" Seeing him standing in the doorway, Zhang Tianhui showed a loving smile. "You're up? Quick, eat the noodles." As she spoke, she carefully tucked a white flour flatbread, already shaped from baking but still half raw, into the stove. "I'll toast some dry rations for you to take and tide you over on the road." Li Xiangyang's heart warmed, and he said no more, picking up the bowl and finishing it in no time. His mother had already used the fire tongs to pull out the flatbread, baked golden brown, brushed off the ash, and wrapped it in a clean coarse cloth. Beside it was an army green turtle flask filled with boiled water. "I've got the baskets ready for you." Zhang Tianhui pointed to the corner of the kitchen. By the light of the kerosene lamp, Li Xiangyang saw 4 large baskets on the ground, already lined with plastic sheeting. Using baskets instead of a back basket was clearly something his mother had carefully considered. The baskets had a lower center of gravity, making them steadier on the handcart and less likely to tip over. The old soft-shelled turtle that had been kept in the water vat last night had also been tied up securely with straw rope and placed in a wooden basin. Carrying the baskets, Li Xiangyang hurried to the pond to scoop up the fish. Zhang Tianhui lit a bamboo tube as a torch and followed him out to light the way. Grabbing a bamboo dip net, Li Xiangyang deftly scooped out 35 carp and 50 or 60 gene of crucian carp into the baskets. At some point, his father Li Maochun was already waiting at the door, steadying a handcart. He remained silent, as ever, and only after Li Xiangyang had loaded the fish onto the cart did he take out hemp rope and fasten the baskets to both sides of the cart bed. "Dad, Mom, I'm off." Li Xiangyang slung on his bag of dry rations, turtle flask, and harness, and called out, "Be careful on the road." Zhang Tianhui placed the old soft-shelled turtle into the basket and anxiously reminded him, "If you can't sell them, come back early, and don't get into trouble." Got it. With that reply, he pulled the cart toward the main road. Li Maochun still said nothing, clasped his hands behind his back, and paced back into the shadows. From Labor Village, where the Li family lived, to Yuehe Bridge, one had to pass through the two villages of Xixin and Henan. At the junction of the more upstream villages of Henan and Yonghong stood Yuehe Bridge. The dirt road was muddy, making the cart hard to pull, but it was still better than carrying everything on his shoulders. By the time he climbed onto Yuehe Bridge, panting, he had already been walking for more than 3 hours. After crossing the bridge and doubling back 3 or 4 kilometers along the opposite bank, he reached today's destination, Hong Street. At this moment, people selling vegetables, eggs, mountain produce, and river delicacies were gathering in 2s and 3s on the open ground by the street. There were only 3 kinds of buyers, either residents of the street or employees of the town's 2 large enterprises, the Qinba Silk Reeling Factory or the Qinba Gold Mine. Li Xiangyang found an empty spot near the street entrance, unloaded the baskets from the cart, and set them in a conspicuous place, then poured out some of the water to reveal the lively carp and large crucian carp inside. After thinking it over, he took out the old soft-shelled turtle as well and placed it in front of the baskets. Oh, what a big turtle! Not long after he had finished setting up, someone was drawn over. A middle-aged woman carrying a vegetable basket squatted down and looked at the trussed-up soft-shelled turtle, then pointed at the carp in the baskets and asked, "Young man, how are you selling the fish?" "Miss, carp is 50 cents a gene, caught from the river, fresh as can be." Li Xiangyang replied with the sales pitch he had prepared on the way. "But we don't have a scale at home, so I can only estimate roughly by size." With a smile, he added another sentence. The woman looked over the quality of the fish, picked up a medium-sized carp, and said, "This one looks about 2 gene. How about 1 yuan?" "Sure. You're a straightforward person too, miss." Li Xiangyang deftly took the fish, tore off a strip of palm leaf, threaded it through the gills, and handed it over. Then a few more people gathered around, some asking about the carp, others about the crucian carp. Carp is 50 cents a gene, and crucian carp is priced by size. 3 for 1 yuan from the first basket, 4 for 1 yuan from the second basket, he said, pointing at the baskets as he introduced them. Soon, people who had their eye on the carp and the large crucian carp began choosing, bargaining, and buying. Some people also asked about the old soft-shell turtle, but when they heard Li Xiangyang wanted 10 yuan, most shook their heads and walked away. As the sun climbed higher, the morning market entered its busiest time. Li Xiangyang was so busy that sweat beaded on his forehead, but his heart was full of energy. There were fewer and fewer fish in the baskets, while there was more and more cash in his pocket, and an unprecedented sense of security quietly rose in his heart. The carp sold the fastest. The price of 50 cents a gene, together with Li Xiangyang's straightforward manner, made them hot sellers. The large crucian carp were also bought up one after another, leaving only a dozen or so smaller crucian carp lazily swishing their tails in the last basket. Gradually, the stall grew quiet. Wiping away his sweat and looking at the few fish left and that old soft-shell turtle, he let out a breath and prepared to pack up. "Young man, wait a moment." Li Xiangyang looked up and saw a poorly dressed old man hurrying over with a bamboo cage in hand, with 2 old hens flapping inside. "Young man, that turtle of yours, and the fish, are they still for sale?" "Yes, sir." Li Xiangyang straightened up. "The turtle is 10 yuan, and the remaining crucian carp. If you want them, 1 yuan will do." Hearing the price, the old man sucked in a breath. "It's just that. There's a new baby in the family, and my daughter-in-law had a difficult labor and lost too much blood, so she has no milk. I heard soft-shell turtle restores qi and blood quickly." The old man's voice trailed off. "I originally wanted to sell the chickens, but couldn't. Could I trade these 2 chickens for your turtle?" He quickly lifted the cage higher. "As for the fish, I'll give you another 1 yuan." Li Xiangyang glanced over the old man's worried face. thought for a moment, and said, "All right, forget the money. Take the turtle and the fish. I'll take the 2 chickens." Before he had even finished speaking, he took the cage, removed the chickens, and put them into the basket, then shoved the turtle and fish into it in return. The old man froze for a moment, then his face filled with delight. Just as he was about to thank him, Xiangyang waved his hand. "Hurry back, don't delay things." Watching the old man turn and leave, he sighed. Living a second life made him understand one truth. Some things are worth taking a loss on, but you must never regret standing by and doing nothing. He weighed the 2 chickens in the basket in his hand. Xiangyang took off his jacket and covered them, then pulled the now mostly empty handcart and strode lightly along the road back to the village. The 2 old hens occasionally let out clucking sounds from the basket, becoming the only accompaniment on the journey home. By the time he passed a dense grove of poplars, it was already around noon. Seeing no one ahead or behind, he pulled the handcart over to the shade by the roadside and slipped deep into the grove. He untied his belt and relieved himself against a tree trunk. As he fastened his pants, he absent-mindedly felt the shoulder bag in his arms that had held his food. The huashao buns had long since been eaten, and now inside was today's earnings from selling fish. Leaning against the big tree, he carefully took out a wrinkled stack of banknotes. There were 4 10-yuan Great Unity notes, while the rest were 5 yuan, 2 yuan, and 1 yuan bills, along with a large number of small denomination notes. 10, 20, 45, 50, 52, 54. After a careful count, the final total came to 78 yuan and 5 jiao. Xiangyang clenched this stack of hard-earned cash, and his arms were even trembling slightly. In those days, when workers' wages were only 40 or 50 yuan, this was no small sum. What's more, this was not just money, but the first brick for changing his fate and smashing open the shackles of poverty. A powerful impulse surged into his heart. Go to the supply and marketing cooperative. Buy some things for the family, and some clothes and shoes. But this thought lasted only an instant before he forcibly suppressed it. Labor Village was the seat of the township government and already had a supply and marketing cooperative, so daily necessities were basically never lacking. More importantly, he knew clearly that what his parents cared about most right now was not these icing-on-the-cake items. Rather than buying a pile of odds and ends that would make them feel bad about the money, it was better to put the actual cash into their hands and let them feel reassured and at ease. He wrapped the money up again, hid it in an inside pocket close to his body, and pressed it firmly. Only then did he pat the dust off himself, walk out of the woods, and pull up the handcart once more. As he passed Xixing village, Xiangyang's attention was drawn by a group of people writing slogans on a wall. Looking more closely, on the yellow-brown earthen wall, a striking line of large characters had been painted in lime water. One person joins the army, the whole family is honored. It was signed by the Township People's Armed Forces Department. Xiangyang's steps unconsciously slowed, his eyes fixed on the 3 characters Armed Forces Department. A dust-covered memory was suddenly stirred awake. Those years after he was demobilized, and before he went out to work, he had heard of a shocking piece of news that happened in a neighboring township. Sometime around 1977 or 1978, a deputy director of the Armed Forces Department in a nearby township, after learning that his wife was having an affair with the township head at the time, used his position to steal a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle from the armory. Late one night, while leading militia training exercises, the deputy director quietly returned home, caught the 2 in the act, and shot both the township head and his own wife dead on the spot. After committing the bloody crime, he did not choose to turn himself in. Instead, he took the gun and a large amount of ammunition and disappeared into the old forest deep in Longwang Gully, vanishing without a trace from then on. Why was this case exposed several years later? The version Xiangyang had heard in his previous life was this. Around 1984, herbalists gathering medicinal plants deep in Longwang Gully at Jingguan Pool found a corpse reduced to nothing but white bones. The mountain folk were terrified and quickly reported it to the township. While the public security authorities were investigating the scene, in a hidden cave not far from the pool, they discovered traces showing that someone had lived there for a long time. They also found that rifle, which had been kept in very good condition, along with a large box of ammunition. That deputy director had probably been hiding in the cave for several years, and in the end likely died of illness, starvation, or an accident. Through personal belongings left in the cave, the police confirmed that the deceased was the deputy director of the Armed Forces Department who had been missing for years, thus uncovering the truth of that case in which the Armed Forces Director caught adulterers and killed them with a gun. Longwang Gully Cave. Type 56 semi-automatic ammunition. These few keywords made Li Xiangyang's heart pound wildly, and his blood rushed to his head in an instant. An extremely bold, even crazy idea surfaced in his mind. It was now August 1982, and there should be less than 2 years before the remains were discovered. If that deputy director was already dead, then find the cave, that gun, and the ammunition. This thought instantly excited Li Xiangyang. The south mountain behind the village was part of the Xiangyang Mountains outlying range and had always been a paradise for wild animals. If there were a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle, it would mean having an inexhaustible treasure trove. As for the risk, deep in the forest, only heaven and earth would know. As for trouble, in the face of real meat and money, it all seemed far less important. The huge temptation left his mouth dry, and he unconsciously licked his lips. The old hen on the handcart clucked twice at an inopportune moment, pulling him back from his reverie to reality. He took a deep breath and stopped looking at the slogan, lowered his head, gripped the handles again, and continued walking toward Liaodong village. By the time he stepped into the familiar courtyard, it was already 3 or 4 in the afternoon. His younger sister Xiaoyun was clutching a handful of tender grass, feeding the little lamb they had rescued, which was tied under the cherry tree. The lamb that had been at death's door yesterday was now able to stand steadily and eat grass at a leisurely pace. It looked like it would survive. "Second brother, you're back." Hearing the commotion, Li Xiangyun immediately skipped over to greet him, her little face full of anticipation. "Did you sell all the fish?" Her gaze habitually swept toward the baskets on the handcart, and when she saw that one basket was covered with a jacket, her eyes filled with curiosity. Li Xiangyang's heart sank at once. It's not that he hadn't thought of his sister, but these days everything had to be bought with ration coupons, especially scarce sweets at the supply and marketing cooperative. Without sugar coupons, they simply couldn't be bought. After returning from selling fish, despite his happiness, his only worry was seeing disappointment in his sister's eyes. Sold out. Li Xiangyang set down the handcart, a tired smile on his face. "Look, what did second brother bring back for you?" As he spoke, he lifted the jacket covering it. "Ah, a big hen." Li Xiangyun cried out in delight and immediately moved closer to the basket, her little face blooming with a smile. "There are even 2. Second brother, you're amazing." She reached out her small hand, wanting to touch the glossy feathers, but afraid of startling them, she carefully drew it back. Traded for the soft-shelled turtle. Once they lay eggs, they'll all be for Xiaoyan to eat. Ruffling his sister's little head, Li Xiangyang silently made up his mind. Next time he went to town, he had to get some sugar coupons and couldn't come back empty-handed again. "No way. I don't want to eat alone." Li Xiangyun shook her head as she helped her second brother move the baskets and the water jug under the eaves. Looking at his sensible younger sister, Li Xiangyang felt a jumble of emotions. "Where are Dad and Mom?" he asked. "They went up the slope to gather beans and left not long ago." Li Xiangyun answered as she walked toward the kitchen. When she came back out, she was holding a large bowl with both hands. "Second brother, Mom saved you some sweet potato porridge. You must be hungry, right? Hurry and eat some." Li Xiangyang put down the fishing net he was checking and quickly took it, opening his mouth wide and gulping it down in a few swallows. Setting the bowl aside, he hardly paused. Still carrying the excitement of successfully selling the fish, he once again slung the basket on his back, picked up the fishing net, and headed for the riverside, hoping to try his luck again while it was still early. However, when he stood once more at the confluence of the 2 rivers, his heart sank. After just one day, the water level had already dropped noticeably, and the river water had become much clearer. It was safer, to be sure, but the schools of fish that had been driven dizzy by the flood yesterday, crowding together and crashing about, had long since scattered without a trace with the changing current. Li Xiangyang walked along the bank for a while, carefully observing the current and the depth, looking for backwater coves where fish might be hiding. In the end, he chose a relatively gentle bend downstream from the confluence. He cast the first net of the day. After waiting patiently for a while and figuring the time was about right, Li Xiangyang began to haul it in. There was no surprise. The net held only a few half-grown small crucian carp. He was not discouraged. He tossed the small fish into the backpack basket, straightened out the net again, changed to another spot, and cast it once more. That afternoon, Li Xiangyang's figure kept moving across the broad riverbank, again and again throwing the net with all his strength, and again dragging it back in disappointment. Sweat soaked through his back, and his arms, after 2 consecutive days of intense labor, ached so badly they were starting to stop obeying him. Only when he saw that the sun was about to set did he put away the fishing net and pour out the day's catch from the backpack basket onto the bank to count it. A dozen or so palm-sized crucian carp, 3 carp of about a gene each. 1 silver carp weighing more than 2 gene, and the rest were just some worthless small miscellaneous fish. Altogether, it came to only a little over 10 gene. Compared with yesterday, it was simply a world of difference. Looking at this small pile of fish, he let out a long breath, full of helplessness. The image of the gun in Xiangyang Gully flashed through his mind, but was immediately suppressed by the reality before his eyes. After packing up the fishing net, he silently hoisted the backpack basket onto his back and headed home. When Xiangyang dragged his weary legs onto the yard, 2 unexpected guests had arrived before him. The Li family's few adobe houses stood at the edge of the village, backed by South Mountain and facing Xiangyang Gully. They lived by themselves, and with his father's taciturn nature, few people normally came to visit. At this moment, however, 2 men were standing under the eaves of the main room that had been assigned to his eldest brother Xiangyang. The one in front was a sturdily built, dark-faced middle-aged man with a square face, wearing a gray Zhongshan suit faded from many washings, with his trouser legs rolled up to his calves. He stood with his back ramrod straight, carrying a naturally imposing air even without anger. It was none other than Zhao Qingshan, the village chief of Labor Village. Standing at Zhao Qingshan's side was a sturdy young man, about 20-something, whose features resembled his by 70 to 80%. He wore a somewhat old blue work uniform. This was Zhao Hongxia's elder brother, Zhao Hongjin. By the 2 men's feet stood 2 half-full woven sacks, and a big rooster with its legs tied with a red cloth strip, restlessly looking around. Li Maochun and Zhang Tianhui were standing together, saying something to the village chief, their faces mixed with unease, respect, and nervousness. Elder brother Li Xiangdong had also come out from the west room, and stood silently half a step behind his parents. Sister-in-law Zhang Ziqin, meanwhile, was hiding at the doorway of the western kitchen, poking half her body out, her eyes full of curiosity. When they saw Li Xiangyang return, everyone turned to look at him. Xiangyang's back. Zhao Qingshan forced a slight smile onto his face and nodded. Only that smile was somewhat stiff, though his gaze was fairly sincere. Village chief, you're here? Li Xiangyang was a little surprised. He set down the backpack basket and the fishing net and quickly stepped forward to greet him. You kid, you did such a good deed and didn't even tell your family. Your father and mother were completely kept in the dark. Zhao Qingshan glanced at Li Maochun and Zhang Tianhui, speaking in a reproachful tone. Li Xiangyang also smiled. It's nothing, just a simple matter of lending a hand. He really had not told his parents about jumping into the floodwaters to save Zhao Hongxia. He had only mentioned it to his younger sister, saying that someone had fallen into the water and he had cast his net to pull her out. I came today specifically to thank you for saving our Hongxia's life yesterday. If you hadn't been so quick-eyed and quick-handed, oh my, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Zhao Qingshan pointed at the things on the ground as he spoke. Zhao Hongjin also cupped his fists. Brother Xiangyang, thank you. Village Chief Zhao, Hongjin, come inside and sit. Why are you standing outside? Zhang Tianhui came to her senses and hurriedly invited them in. The village chief had personally come to their door and even brought so many things. To her, this was already an enormous honor. No, we'll just say a couple of words at the door and leave. Zhao Qingshan waved his hand. His gaze swept over Li Xiangyang's somewhat tired face. That girl Hongxia was badly frightened yesterday, and swallowed some water too. She's still lying inside resting. And she also told me to make sure her brother and I brought our thanks. He pointed to the snakeskin sack on the ground. This is 50 gene of rice, 50 gene of flour. It's not worth much money, just a token of our appreciation. Then he pointed at the big rooster. As for this chicken, just treat it as an extra dish for your table. Oh, village chief Zhao, this is far too valuable. We really can't accept it. Zhang Tianhui waved her hands repeatedly. 50 gene of rice, 50 gene of flour, plus a big rooster. No matter whose household it was in, this was a very substantial gift. Take it. This is just a small token from our family. Zhao Qingshan's tone carried a somewhat commanding force. Then, from the upper pocket of his Zhongshan suit, he pulled out a stack of brand new Great Unity notes. This is 100 yuan. Zhao Qingshan stuffed the stack of money into Li Maochuan's pocket. Xiangyang took such a big risk yesterday to save someone. This little bit of money can count as a bit of compensation. Buy the boy a new set of clothes, or add some furniture or something. 100 yuan. The corner of Li Maochuan's mouth twitched. He hurriedly tried to refuse and said no, but both his hands were firmly pushed back by Zhao Qingshan. This scene made Li Xiangdong and Zhang Ziqin behind him both suck in a sharp breath, their faces full of surprise. Li Xiangyang's heart tightened too, because this gift was too heavy, and it made him feel that something was off. Sure enough, Zhao Qingshan withdrew his hand, and the smile on his face faded somewhat. He looked around at everyone in the Li family, and finally let his gaze settle on Li Xiangyang. Xiangyang. Zhao Qingshan's tone grew heavier. About what happened yesterday. You saved Hongxia, so you are a benefactor to our Zhao family. We will remember this kindness for the rest of our lives. He paused slightly, as if choosing his words, but still, you know, in a rural place like ours, there are many people and many wagging tongues. So many people were watching by the river yesterday, Sai. Once gossip starts, there's no stopping it. Li Xiangyang nodded, probably understanding what Zhao Qingshan was trying to say. Some of the things people spread sound really awful. Zhao Qingshan sighed and continued, Xiangyang, you're still young, and you have a long road ahead of you. As for Hongxia, he paused again. Her husband's family has already been chosen. The man is a driver at the No. 2 silk reeling factory, a regular employee. The young man is decent, and his family is in good condition. It's already been agreed that, once she marries in, Hongxia will get an urban household registration, and they can also arrange a job for her. He deliberately emphasized regular employee, urban household registration, and arranged job, while keeping his eyes fixed tightly on Li Xiangyang, as if observing his reaction. So, Zhao Qingshan's tone softened a little. Our family acknowledges the favor we owe you for what happened yesterday, and you should accept these gifts of thanks. As for Hongxia, we will keep a close eye on her too, and those bits of gossip, let them rot away on their own. What do you think? Is that acceptable? The courtyard instantly fell silent, and awkward expressions appeared on Li Maochun and Zhang Tianhui's faces. The village chief's words, though polite, could not have been clearer, for the life-saving kindness. He had offered a heavy gift in thanks, so the matter ended here. There was to be no further entanglement with Zhao Hongxia. This was gratitude, but also distancing, and even more, a warning. Li Xiangyang looked at Zhao Qingshan's eyes, which carried a sense of pressure and also a hint of pleading, then looked at the rice, flour, and rooster on the ground, and fell silent for a moment. A trace of disappointment flashed across his face, but it returned to normal in an instant. Village chief, Brother Hongjin, I accept your kindness. He nodded, so calmly that even Zhao Qingshan was somewhat surprised. What happened yesterday? Whoever had been by the river would have lent a hand. As for Hongxia, it's a good thing that she has a good future ahead of her. As for a little gossip, don't worry, I know what I should do. He didn't say, I understand, but rather, I know what to do. This calm and restrained response made Zhao Qingshan inexplicably breathe a sigh of relief, yet he also felt faintly uneasy. Good, good. Xiangyang, you're a sensible boy. Zhao Qingshan forced a smile back onto his face and patted Li Xiangyang on the shoulder. Well then, we'll head back first. There's still stuff to do at home. Village chief, Hongjin, why not stay a bit longer and have some water? Zhang Tianhui hurriedly urged them to stay. No, no, another day, another day? Zhao Qingshan waved his hand and strode away from the Li family home with his son Zhao Hongjin, their figures quickly disappearing down the path as dusk deepened. Under the eaves, only the Li family remained, along with the pile of gifts on the ground that carried both gratitude and invisible pressure. The evening breeze blew by with a slight chill. The big rooster seemed to sense the heaviness in the air too and stopped moving. Li Maochun took out that stack of 10-yuan bills again, his fingers trembling as he counted through them once more, glanced at Li Xiangyang, and finally stuffed the money back into his pocket, silently pulling out his tobacco pouch. Li Xiangdong frowned, looking at the rice and flour on the ground, then at his younger brother. Zhang Ziqin's gaze shifted once between Li Maochun's pocket holding the bills and the sacks of grain before she turned and walked into her own kitchen. In the end, it was Li Xiangyang who broke the silence. He bent down, picked up the big rooster, and handed it to his mother. Mom, now we have 3 chickens. If not tomorrow, let's make a chicken coop, okay? Okay. Zhang Tianhui nodded. I'll do it tomorrow morning. Li Xiangyang responded, then walked over to the 2 woven sacks, one hand on each, and lifted them up with ease, his steps steady as he headed toward the kitchen on the east side. His younger sister Xiaoyun was tending the fire to boil water. When she saw him come in, her big eyes blinked, as if she wanted to say something, but she held it back. After setting down the sacks of rice and flour, Li Xiangyang moved the backpack basket to the fish pond he had dug beside the house last night. Although it had seeped all through the day, it was still almost full of water. From the fish he had caught that afternoon, he picked out some of the livelier ones and tossed them into the pond, then splashed some pond water onto his face and couldn't help sighing. Zhao Qingshan's words, which seemed like thanks but were actually meant to draw a line, along with that bit of news about Zhao Hongxia's marriage, were like a thorn lodged in some hidden corner of his heart. But that thorn was soon pressed down by a more practical and more urgent problem: how to change this family's impoverished situation. And there was also the flood and landslide that would arrive in just 1 year, devouring everything. This was the most pressing issue right now. Clearly, there was still much to do, and a long road still lay ahead. At that moment, his mother came in and began tidying the chopping board to make dinner for the family. Li Xiangyang handed the 4 10-yuan bills and 2 5-yuan bills he had prepared in advance to his mother. "Mom, this is the money from selling fish today. Keep it." Zhang Tianhui hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took the money before turning toward the bedroom connected to the kitchen. Seeing his mother leave, Li Xiangyang pulled out a relatively new 1-yuan bill and handed it to his younger sister. "Xiaoyan, this is yours. Keep it to buy school supplies when school starts." Li Xiangyun grinned broadly and softly said, "Thank you, second brother," then sat back down behind the stove to tend the fire. Smiling at his younger sister, Li Xiangyang picked up the silver carp he had caught that afternoon from the basin on the ground, then gathered a few larger half-dead crucian carp on a string and went out to find his elder brother. When he saw his younger brother bringing over several more fish, Li Xiangdong looked astonished. After all, in just 2 days, this was already the 3rd time. He gave Li Xiangyang a somewhat scrutinizing look and did not reach out to take them. "Brother, can you help me get some bamboo strips? About 1.5 meters long, around 50 or 60 pieces." As he spoke, Li Xiangyang handed over the fish in his hand. "What do you need that for?" Seeing that his younger brother needed help, Li Xiangdong took the fish and asked casually, "The water in the Yu River has gone down, and fish are harder to catch. I'm planning to set up a fish weir in the gully." Li Xiangyang did not hide it, and told his brother about the idea he had on the way back from fishing today. "A fish weir?" Li Xiangdong's eyebrows lifted slightly. As a bamboo craftsman, he naturally understood the use of bamboo strips and also realized what his younger brother wanted to do. The so-called fish weir, also called a fish bed, is a common fishing method in the Qinba area, in a stretch of river where the current is relatively slow. Large stones are piled diagonally from both banks toward the center of the river to form 2 trumpet-shaped stone dikes, commonly known as a figure-8 weir or figure-8 dam. The wide end of the trumpet opening faces upstream, while the narrow end converges downstream, forming a narrow outlet. Below the outlet, a fish trap, fish bed, or fish basket woven from bamboo splints or wire is placed. This method of catching fish makes use of the habits of river fish. During the day, they like to swim upstream against the current, especially during rising water, when they are even more eager to push upstream in search of food and more suitable habitats. At night, they often drift downstream again, making short-distance migrations or foraging. When schools of fish swim with the current into the trumpet opening of the fish weir, they are gradually guided by the narrowing stone dikes and funneled into that narrow outlet, then plunge straight into the fish trap below. Once they get in, because the weir opening and the trap are set with a drop, it becomes very hard for them to escape. "Where do you want to set it up?" Li Xiangdong asked, his tone very serious. "Right in front of our house. The water is shallow, the bottom is flat, there are lots of stones, and it'll be easy to collect the fish." Got it." Nodding, Li Xiangdong ended the conversation. Back in the kitchen, while his mother was between tasks cooking, Li Xiangyang quickly cleaned up the miscellaneous fish he had caught today. He kept several carp and crucian carp alive, gave the other larger fish to his elder brother, and what remained were only some white minnows, topmouth coulters, and stream groupers. On the way home today, he had already thought it through. After the flood, unless he got unbelievably lucky and ran into a school of fish, it would be very hard to catch a large haul from the Yu River in a short time. Casting nets normally was fine for improving daily meals, but catching fish to sell for money was unlikely. So he came up with the plan to set up a fish weir. While everyone was still wary of the policy, he decided to act first and gain the upper hand. That way, even if others wanted to do the same. According to local Qinba rules, no one would dare openly set up a fish weir not far upstream from someone else's. That would get them drowned in spit. The upper reaches of Longwang Gully are densely vegetated, and even in winter can maintain a flow of 30 centimeters of water. With this rise in water, along dozens of li of riverway, there were surely quite a few wild fish that had pushed upstream and remained in the middle and upper reaches. Setting up a fish weir downstream would not only bring stable catches, but probably abundant ones as well. The Qinghai region borders Hubei and Chongqing, and braised small fish has always been the most common dish at all kinds of banquets, and also everyone's favorite and most popular dish. Especially as the weather turns cooler later on and catching fish becomes difficult, if he could steadily obtain dried small fish, he naturally would not have to worry about sales. As for the gun deep in Longwang Gully, it wasn't that he hadn't considered it, but this year's rainy season had not ended yet, and the roads were hard to walk. Although he knew the location of Jingwantan, at the turn of summer and autumn, finding a cave amid the lush green mountains was almost impossible. Dinner was jiangshui bantang. Jiangshui is a sour vegetable soup that is a household staple in the Qinghai region and even in parts of Gansu province. Made from wild greens or radish leaves, blanched and fermented for a few days, it becomes an ingredient with a distinctive tart fragrance. Jiangshui bantang then uses seasoned jiangshui as the soup base, into which bits of dough are stirred and cooked into a thick soup of just the right consistency. If you sprinkle on some chopped scallions and add a little chili oil, the taste is even more irresistible. For Xiangyang, who in his previous life had drifted from place to place working away from home for many years, this bowl of jiangshui bantang, with its faintly sour, refreshing, appetite-whetting flavor, had always been a taste he longed for day and night. Holding a large coarse porcelain bowl and slurping the piping hot bantang, that familiar flavor slid down his throat, warming his whole body and easing the fatigue that had built up during the day, along with that subtle trace of disappointment in his heart. After eating, he weighed up the small mixed fish he had caught today. There seemed to be about 1.5 gene of them. He mixed some coarse salt into the fish, then spread them evenly across the bottom of the wok, using the residual hot ash in the stove to slowly bake them. That way, by tomorrow morning, they would be fragrant and crispy dried small fish. After finishing all this, he hurriedly washed his face and lay down on the bed. Over in the west room, his elder brother Xiangyang still had not gone to bed and was busy under the dim kerosene lamp. He was rushing to make the fish sieve his younger brother wanted. Go to sleep, do it tomorrow. The lamp oil is almost burned dry, Zhang Ziqin urged, her voice carrying a hint of complaint. Almost done, it'll be finished in a moment. Li Xiangdong replied, not pausing his work. Hey, don't you think? The second one seems to have changed these past few days. Not only has he stopped fooling around outside, but everything he's thinking about and doing is proper business. In the darkness, Zhang Ziqin turned over. After a moment of silence, she said softly again, catching fish to sell for money, and then thinking about fish traps and the like. Li Xiangdong gave a sound of agreement. It's just that I don't know how many days this drive can last. Zhang Ziqin's voice carried a bit of doubt. Who knows? Li Xiangdong's hands seemed to pause for a moment, his voice lowering a little, but since it's rare for him to want to do something serious, as his elder brother, I have to support him. Early the next morning, Li Xiangyang was awakened by the crisp birdsong outside the window. When he pushed the door open and stepped out, he saw at a glance an object quietly leaning against the wall by the door. It was a fish sieve woven from bamboo strips and split green bamboo, about 1.5 to 1.6 meters long, and 1.2 meters wide, with guardrails about 20 centimeters high on both sides to keep the fish from escaping. It wasn't especially exquisite, but it was exceptionally sturdy. He had only asked his elder brother for some bamboo strips last night, and this morning the fish sieve was already by the door. It seemed this was the result of his staying up until the middle of the night. Thinking of this, Li Xiangyang felt a surge of emotion. In the kitchen, his mother had already prepared breakfast, steamed sweet potatoes, mixed pickled vegetables, plus a few cornmeal buns baked golden brown. The small fish that had been baking in the wok last night had already been put away by his mother in a clay basin. Li Xiangyang held it in his hands and weighed it. There was probably about half a gene. After calculating it, he realized that 1.5 gene of clean small fish could only be baked down to half a gene, and he felt a little dejected. Who knew how much this dried fish could sell for? If the price was too low, then this money really wouldn't be easy to earn. At this moment, Zhang Tianhui was behind the house tying together a chicken coop with wooden sticks. The newly arrived chickens at home had to be kept in the coop for a month, otherwise they would be easy to lose if let out. It had only been 3 months since the land was distributed to individual households, and at least half the families in the village still had no livestock or poultry. And over these past 2 days, their own family had added a sheep and 3 chickens one after another, filling her with energy and drive. Li Maochun was not idle either, sitting on a small stool, holding hemp twine and a shuttle in his hands, carefully mending the casting net that had been overused for 2 straight days and was already full of holes. That little sheep, too, had been tied beneath the pomelo tree by the edge of the yard, with a big pile of fresh, tender grass placed in front of it. After hurriedly eating a few bites, Xiangyang took up his machete and walked to the hillside behind the house. He picked out several birch oak poles of suitable thickness, chopped them down neatly, trimmed off the branches, and carried them back. These poles were to be used as fixed supports for the fish sieve. He found a hammer, picked up that brand new fish sieve, shouldered several poles, and headed for Xiangyang Gully in front of the house. From the family yard down to the bottom of the gully, there was only a drop of about 30 meters, and the straight line distance was less than 100 meters. He stopped at the stretch of shallow shoal he had selected the day before. The riverbed here was broad and covered with stones of various sizes, making it the ideal place to set up the fish trap. Setting his things down, Xiangyang chose a spot, steadied the wobbling pole with one hand, and with the other swung the hammer, trying to drive the sharpened birch oak pole firmly into the gravel. However, the job was not easy. The layer of sand and gravel on the riverbed looked loose, yet it was extraordinarily hard. Clang, clang, clang. The hammer struck the top of the wooden pole, numbing the web between his thumb and forefinger. But the pole only sank a tiny bit crookedly. Even after more than a dozen blows, it was still wobbling and not secure at all. He took a breath and was just about to try another spot. Suddenly, there came the sound of splashing footsteps through the water from behind him. Immediately after, Li Maochuan's big calloused hand reached over and, without a word, took the hammer from his hand. Li Xiangyang looked up in astonishment and saw his father with his trouser legs rolled high, barefoot in the icy river water. His face still showed little expression. He only said, "Hold it steady," then swung the hammer and brought it down solidly on top of the pole. The pole suddenly sank downward, firmly driven deep into the hard riverbed. Li Xiangyang quickly grabbed hold with both hands. Li Maochun said no more, striking hammer blow after hammer blow, and the wooden stakes serving as the fish sieve's support finally became stable. With his father's help, the remaining 3 stakes were soon standing firmly in the riverbed as well. Then they tied on thinner crossbars, lower in front and higher in back, forming a frame to support the fish sieve. Setting down the hammer, Li Maochun did not hurry away. He helped Li Xiangyang place the fish sieve onto the assembled frame, raised and leveled it with stones, and then held it down with a long stone slab, creating a drop between the sieve and the funnel opening. Working together, father and son used the prepared hemp rope to tie the fish sieve down securely, making sure it would not be easily washed away or shifted by the current. Fixing the fish sieve in place only completed the foundation of the fish trap. Next came the crucial step of building the fish trap on the river channel in front of the fish sieve's entrance. They used stones of suitable sizes to stack and build a gradually narrowing V-shaped dam, guiding the scattered flow of water and ultimately forcing the fish to follow the current and gather into the fish sieve. Reaching out to push it and seeing that the fish sieve was very secure, Li Maochun bent down and began selecting and carrying stones. He specifically chose flat, long stones with some weight to them, such as bluestone or flagstones, lifting them one by one and stacking them in order along the entrance to the fish sieve. Li Xiangyang quickly followed suit and went to build the dam on the other side. After a burst of work by father and son, the rudimentary shape of the figure-8 dam began to emerge, and the water flow was gradually constrained, gathering at the screen's entrance. Just as they were working together to clear a large rock in the middle of the riverbed, a thick black shadow burst out from beneath the rock with a splash, darting toward the gap in the figure-8 dam. "A fish!" Li Xiangyang cried out in surprise. Right after that, a burst of thrashing came from the fish screen they had just set up. Li Maochun, who was closest to the fish screen, lunged over in 2 steps, his fingers clenched tight, and lifted up a big catfish weighing about 3 jin by its gills. A rare trace of a smile appeared on his face, clearly showing how pleased he was with this unexpected catch. After weighing the catfish in his hand, he walked to the riverbank, pulled off a willow twig, deftly threaded it in through the gills and out the mouth, tied a knot, and tossed it onto the grass. With this auspicious start, the father and son worked with even greater energy. Together, they completely removed the large rocks from the fish trap and thoroughly cleared the riverbed. Over the next hour or so, the two kept their heads down and worked hard, constantly carrying and stacking stones, until a complete figure-8-shaped stone dam finally took shape. Like 2 arms, it drew powerfully inward from both sides of the riverbank toward the center, namely the entrance of the fish screen. The originally gentle, scattered current was forcibly constrained by this figure-8 dam, surging violently into the screen at the dam's mouth. Standing in the water, Li Maochun carefully inspected every gap in the figure-8 dam, then bent down and moved a few small stones, sealing up some small holes where fish might escape. Only after seeing that the current had been directed toward the fish screen in trance to the greatest extent possible did he nod in satisfaction and walk to the riverbank, pick up the catfish from the grass, take up the iron hammer, and head home without a word. Watching his father walk off carrying the fish, Li Xiangyang jumped back into the dam once more. The overall framework was already in place. All that remained was the fine work, carefully stuffing the inner side of the figure-8 dam, especially the section near the screen, with smaller gravel to ensure that it could only let water through, not fish. As he worked, he couldn't help curiously craning his neck to look at the fish screen. After being narrowed and accelerated by the figure-8 dam, the current became exceptionally swift at the entrance, and foamy white water came rolling into the screen. At the bottom of the screen, fish shadows could already be clearly seen darting about. In just this short while, hundreds of river fish had already gathered there, although none of them were particularly big, consisting mostly of white-striped fish, Chinese hooksnout, and stream rock bass, mixed with a few small catfish of less than a Jin and crucian carp weighing 2 or 3 liang. This efficiency was already far beyond what yesterday's hard work casting nets had achieved. Li Xiangyang wiped the sweat from his face and, looking at the growing catch in the screen, finally broke into a broad smile on his tired face. His heart leaped with excitement as well. After a moment's thought, Li Xiangyang understood there was no electric fishing or fish poisoning in this era, no such ruthless methods, so it made sense that there were plenty of fish. Xiaoyan! Xiaoyan! He immediately cupped his hands and shouted toward home. His younger sister's crisp replies soon came from the slope. Hey, second brother, what is it? Bring the big bamboo cage from home. Hurry. Li Xiangyang's voice carried a barely restrained excitement. Li Xiangyun answered with an "oh," and her small figure quickly ran toward the house. And before long, she came running down the riverbank, stumbling along with the family's big bamboo cage in hand. Second brother here? Panting, she handed over the bamboo cage and curiously craned her neck to look into the screen. Ah, so many fish. Quick, come catch the fish. Li Xiangyang had no time for more words. He called for his sister to help, and the two quickly began tossing the fish from the screen into the cage. Seeing that he had caught about enough, he carried the half-full bamboo cage and ran home. Quickly reaching the newly dug fish pond, he put in all the crucian carp over 200 grams and all the catfish over 500 grams to keep alive there. As for the remaining densely packed small mixed fish, he dumped them all at once into the large wooden basin by the door. Mom, I'll have to trouble you and Xiaoyan with these little ones. Li Xiangyang wiped away his sweat and shouted to his mother, who had finished tying up the chicken coop and was feeding the chickens. While there's still sun today, clean them, mix them with salt, and spread them out to dry on the shallow bamboo trays used for raising silkworms. Dry as many as you can. Zhang Tianhui looked at the pile of small fish in the wooden basin, her face showing both joy and heartache. So many? How much salt will that take? Though it pained her, her hands did not stop. She immediately picked up the water dipper to fetch water and called Xiaoyan over to wash the fish together. Families living by the river were no strangers to cleaning fish. Small river fish didn't need their gills removed. You just roughly scrape the scales, cut open the belly and remove the innards, quickly rinse them a few times in clean water, drain them, mix them with salt, and they were ready to be dried. Of course, the scraped off scales and removed innards couldn't just be thrown away either, because they could be used to feed the chickens. Xiaoyan was small and not very strong, so she was in charge of scraping the scales. Zhang Tianhui sat on a small stool, carefully washing the fish, then mixing them with salt and laying them out to dry on the bamboo trays. Without a moment's pause, Li Xiangyang returned to the riverbank, inspecting the fish trap as he went, making repairs while observing the catch. In less than half an hour, the sieve was full of fish again. He quickly grabbed the fish and put them into the cage, then repeated the process of sorting them, keeping the big fish alive and dumping out the small fish. All afternoon, the Li family's courtyard was filled with a faint fishy smell and an air of bustling activity. Li Xiangyang was like a tireless spinning top, shuttling back and forth between the riverbank and the courtyard. Zhang Tianhui and Xiaoyan kept their heads down by the wooden basin, their hands soaked until they turned pale. But even so, their cleaning speed still couldn't keep up with the speed at which Li Xiangyang brought in fish. By the time the sun slanted westward and evening approached, the large crucian carp and small catfish in the water pit were already packed tightly full. And on the more than 10 shallow bamboo trays in the courtyard, there were also layers upon layers of small salted fish spread out to dry. The air was filled with the distinctive smell of salt mingled with fresh river fish. When Xiangyang dragged his weary body back into the courtyard once again, the scene before him seemed to show him hope of turning his life around, and a heartfelt smile spread across his face. The output from this fish trap far exceeded his imagination. After a rough calculation, in just this half-day alone, he had harvested more than 50 kilograms of live fish, equivalent to what he used to catch in 2 days of casting nets, and it was far more sustainable. However, he soon discovered 2 pressing problems. The first was on his mother Zhang Tianhui's side. Clearly, she was being too stingy with the salt. If too little salt was used, it wouldn't achieve the preservative effect, and during drying, the fishy smell would also attract flies. Xiangyang walked over to a bamboo tray, picked up a small fish, and tasted it. It was so bland it was almost not salty at all. He gave a wry smile. "Mom, there's too little salt. These will spoil easily when dried. Salt is precious, but if these dried fish are sold, won't the price be higher than the salt no matter what?" Zhang Tianhui was bending over spreading out the fish. Hearing her son's words, she straightened up and somewhat awkwardly wiped her hands on her apron, her face showing a trace of embarrassment. I was afraid using too much salt would be wasteful. Mom, listen to me. Mix in more salt. Rub it in evenly. It doesn't matter if it's saltier. Once dried, it'll keep. Besides, once the dried fish is sold, it will bring in several times the cost of the salt anyway. Xiangyang, go to the supply and marketing cooperative and buy 10 jin of salt. As he spoke, he took out 2 yuan from his pocket and handed it to his younger sister. The remaining 50 cents is yours. Consider it your wages for today. Salt didn't require ration coupons at the time and cost 15 cents per jin, which he knew. Xiaoyan happily took the money, grabbed a cloth bag from the kitchen, and left. Zhang Tianhui looked at her son's serious expression, then at the fish filling the courtyard, and finally nodded. Okay, Mom understands. I'll add more right away. The salt issue was considered solved, but the second problem was even trickier. The family's shallow bamboo trays, including those at his elder brother and sister-in-law's home, had all been used up. But the peak time for the fish run is at night. Once it gets dark, even more fish will drift downstream. If there's nowhere to dry them then, after one night, all these fish will stink.